Hello and welcome to the Zeitgeist podcast. My name is Greg.
My name's Nick.
And as you can see, behind us we have our story light today.
Storyline.
So that means we're telling a story. There's going to be some narration here, and this time it's going to be a no sleep. Now, we are big fans of no sleep, or at least we were a long time ago. I didn't realize how long it's been.
Yeah, I was there in the Ben Drowned days.
Ben Drowned was a classic. But the one that we're talking about today was kind of overshadowed by another very popular no sleep that came out at exactly the same time. I remembered reading both of these at the same time as the episodes as the parts kept coming out. This one was overshadowed by the Search and Rescue Officer No Sleep.
Yes.
Which is fantastic.
And if you don't know what that is, you probably know the trend, the staircase in the woods. Like, do not climb the staircase in the woods. Don't go near it. Don't touch it. Don't look at it. That's been a very big horror trend lately. That originated from Search and Rescue Officer. However, this story is in a similar vein, but more terrifying for me because I absolutely hate the ocean. And what is it?
It's Confessions of a Deep Sea Diver, written by PizzND. That's the author's name. PizzND. And so we're going to go ahead and jump into this. I'm going to read the first part, and then if we keep in the same episode, Nick will read the second part. If we do a separate episode,
there's actually 3 parts.
3 parts.
Mm-hmm. Looking this up, just to highlight the author, they have written a large amount of no sleeps.
Good.
They stopped about 8 years ago. So they haven't written anything new, but they do have a lot of different ones. So they are a very good author. They wrote one more series after this called Smoke and Ash.
I didn't read that one. This 2015 was my last year of being really active on Reddit. So this is one of the last ones I read, and I loved it. So here we go. This is Confessions of a Deep Sea Diver. I recently left my job as a deep sea diver. Worked for a large company that offers diving services ranging from salvage, underwater demolition, ship repairs, and search and recovery. They are a reputable company and are considered safe and reliable. So much so that they're often contracted by the government. Truth be told, I will miss working for them. The people I worked with were truly the best of the best. But there's only so many unexplainable things you can witness in the deep before you decide to stay out of the ocean forever. Here are some examples of the secrets many divers take to their graves. And a bottle of
and beggars like the.
All right. On the way to a job we were contracted to perform, our propeller became fouled. I suited up and prepared to make a quick dive to remove the fouling. Should we define fouling?
I'm assuming that's something got tangled up in the propeller.
Okay. These, like I said, deep sea diver stuff. We're not sailors, but we're learning.
It's just the thought, like submechanophobia, just like being underwater with that, that image deeply unsettles me.
Great. This will be fun. I did a brief inspection and located thick line wrapped around the prop and shaft. I notified the supervisor, who then lowered a canvas bag with tools I needed to cut it off. I hung the bag from the shaft and began freeing the propeller. It didn't take long, and I returned to my tool bag. I noticed a strange crunching sound when I dropped the tools in the bag. When I looked in the bag, it was full of large shells, many of which I had just crushed. After getting out of the water and stripping off my gear, I began examining them. The shells had what appeared to be hieroglyphics etched into them. Learned from one of the senior guys that this wasn't common, but it had happened to several of them before. On one other occasion, we were recovering a military aircraft. When we arrived, naval ships were on the scene waiting for us to recover it for them. We were quickly briefed that they had just lost communications with the pilot and wanted us to recover it so they could investigate. I was sitting comms and logs, communicate with divers and monitor depth and bottom time, when the divers reached the project. They reported that the plane was intact. We were all surprised. The supervisor asked how extensive the damage was, and they explained it was completely intact. As in, there was no visible damage at all. It was just resting on the bottom. Even stranger, the aircraft canopy was still in place. That means that the cockpit is still sealed, and in other words, the pilot did not eject. But there was no sign of the pilot. We recovered the plane, and the military took custody of it, and we never heard about it again. Witnessed another strange occurrence from topside at the location of a planned demolition. It's necessary to explain that one way you can keep track of a diver is to watch their bubble stream. When a diver inhales, the helmet's demand regulator provides air from their umbilical. I want to clarify, these are not fetal divers. They're using a cord to breathe.
That is a good name for them, though. Fetal divers.
Well, the umbilical cords.
I know, that'd be a fun name if they were actually called fetal divers.
Could be a band name, fetal divers.
Fetal divers. Fetal divers in the umbilicals?
Yeah, it could be a band name. And then when they exhale, it's exhausted into the water and floats up to the surface. On topside, you can watch the bubbles to get a general sense of where the divers are. Now, on this occasion, we were hundreds of miles from land. They placed 2 divers in the water. About an hour into the dive, we started noticing something strange was happening. There were 3 distinct bubble streams coming from where they were working. First, we assumed it was a current and it was affecting them, but soon we noticed a 4th set of bubbles coming from a distance. It stopped 20 feet from the divers, near the other mysterious bubbles. We asked the divers, but neither could see anything out of the ordinary. Then, even from the surface, we heard a blood-curdling screech from the waters. Then silence. The divers weren't too concerned. We hear strange things all the time. Sound travels well in the water, and you learn to assume it's a long distance away, but soon, it looked like the water in the distance was boiling, and it was getting closer. It wasn't boiling, though. It was countless new bubble streams moving nearer to the location our divers were working. The supervisor ordered the divers to get onto the dive stage, be lifted back to the surface. The bubbles were frighteningly close now, and the divers being lifted out said they had begun seeing shadowed figures in the distance. They couldn't quite make out what they were, though. We elected to pull the divers out without completing their decompression stops and throw them into the hyperbaric chamber.
Oh, okay, hang on. To comment on the last 2, one, I also hate flying, so having a fully intact, like, military jet, I'm assuming, at the bottom, fully intact with just no pilot.
Yep.
Awful. And then
weird, right?
Literally a scream, and then, like, the mouth of, like, the bloop was, like, opens up and it's like bubbles, 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 bubbles or something.
Well, but no, it's because there were so many other divers out there that all converged on that one area where their divers were working. That's what it was. It was all the bubbles from countless other divers.
Wait, like that, but they couldn't see them?
But they couldn't see them, except they were shadowy figures.
Holy shit.
Spooky, right?
I was thinking it was one massive creature or something.
No, it was a bunch of other divers.
That's even... Okay, keep going.
During another dive near the Bahamas, I had a frightening experience. It was my first salvage job with them, so I got in with a highly experienced diver. At just over 200 feet deep, we were examining the sunken vessel for rigging points. As I approached the bow of the ship, I noticed he was investigating a damaged portion of the hull. He swam a few feet into the ship, looking around, and I asked him a few times if he wanted me to tend to his his air supply hose. From just outside the ship, it's highly advisable, since it's dangerous to enter a sunken ship, to which he stated no. He didn't want to enter the ship. He insisted he was on the port side of the ship. Assuming he was disoriented, I reached in to grab him. Just before touching him, I realized there were no bubbles coming from the helmet. Whatever this was, it wasn't breathing. I back up and I reported that something else was down here. I expected mockery, but there was none. The next thing I heard was the diving supervisor.
Both divers, square yourself away and get ready to leave bottom.
When back on the surface, I asked the supervisor about it. He said he refused to put his divers in exceptionally dangerous situations. And then he refused to clarify. He declined to complete the salvage.
What do you know? What do you know? I don't... Stop that!
Yeah, I know. I'm not entirely sure how to explain this next dive. I was on bottom, laying on my back, staring up toward the surface. All I could see were varying shades of darkness, and suddenly I came to my senses. I had no memory of how I got here, but I realized I couldn't remember getting into the water, or even why I was here. I tried to will my body to stand up, but I realized I couldn't move. I couldn't control my body. Over the comms, I can hear Topside instructing the other diver to find me. How long had I been down here? How long had I been missing? He told Topside that they grabbed him. I tried to shout, but I couldn't even do that. After a few frantic minutes of communication between the diver and Topside, I noticed a shadow, growing clear. It was moving towards me.
Topside, I found him.
He reached down and grabbed my harness to drag me back to the dive stage. As he pulled me, I rolled over and got a brief glance at my surroundings. I had been laying on a pile of human bones.
What the hell? What? He lost, like, cognitive function and then was laying on the ocean floor on a pile of bones?
Yep. That's the story on that one. Yep.
And then the supervisor just like, you saw nothing.
I mean, I guess he didn't ask on that one. He didn't say. I don't know.
mean,
I'd have questions.
I'd have a few questions.
I'd have questions. I'm not saying he's right in that. I'm just saying he didn't say that he asked.
Okay.
One of the strangest things I've ever witnessed happened on a body recovery mission. Even I wouldn't have believed it if I hadn't been the one in the water. The military had found a site in which they believed the bodies of several missing World War II sailors would be found. I entered the water with another diver with body bags to carry the remains. On bottom, we eventually found 3 skeletons. We placed them in the bags, returned to the stage. On our return trip to the surface, we saw the bags begin to move. At first, very slightly, and then violently shaking and rolling. Bubbles escaped from 2 of the bags. Then they went still. The 3rd bag continued struggling. We reached surface, sat down on the deck, stripped our gear immediately. We were afraid to touch the bags, but one of the tenders eventually unzipped the moving bag. An old, frail, very alive man rolled out coughing water. We stood shocked, unable to comprehend what we were witnessing. Still not sure what I was doing, I ran to the other 2 bags and unzipped them. There were 2 more old men laying motionless in the bags. They appeared to have just drowned. We attempted CPR, but we were unable to revive the men. The man, who was somehow now alive, was backing away from us, screaming of the horrors he'd witnessed. He screamed about an eternity spent burning. We locked him in a room and contacted the military that we had found a survivor. Within the hour, a military chopper was hovering over us to pick up the 2 bodies and the survivor. We had placed the bodies back in their bags and handed them over. The man bent over to inspect them, unzipping the bags. As he opened the bags, an unbearable stench overtook us. The bodies appeared to be in decay, as if they had been dead and soaking in the water for a week. He zipped it back up and had them lifted into the chopper. Then we escorted him to the survivor. We could hear the screaming from down the hall. We opened the door and saw blood splattered on the walls. He was alive and screaming, but he too appeared to have started decaying. The man calmly walked him to the chopper, and the 2 of them were lifted on board. We never heard about them again. However, I went back and examined the room, and with the blood, he had drawn hieroglyphics on the walls. Still not certain of what I viewed, but there were things that seemed to stand out. Waves, flames, and bodies. There was a tremendous amount of them on the walls, but shortly after I walked in, the supervisor began scrubbing them. He refused to let us examine any further. I've heard rumors about the Keepers of the Deep. I've wondered about them for quite some time. I believe that they are the link between many of our stories. Their myth within our team is seldom spoken of. But here's what I gathered over the years. We are not meant to roam the depths of the ocean. And when a diver loses his life in the deep, it doesn't stay that way. They are cursed to forever roam the oceans, and when they find the living, in an envious rage, they will bring you back to the depths from which they came.
Oh my God. I'm sorry. Just, you die in the ocean and you're forever cursed to drown over and over again.
That's what he said.
Keepers of the Deep, that one also, and so also at the very end, I want to point out this connection. The shells at the beginning had hieroglyphics on them.
Yeah.
Hieroglyphics were shown up at the end.
Yeah.
I'm thinking Keepers of the Deep. Cthulhu?
It's probably Cthulhu.
Cthulhu? I'm thinking Cthulhu Eldritch Horror vibes here.
Yeah.
Like that. Here, that the last bit where the part where he said the guy, the living guy, he's like, oh, like it sounded like he came back from hell, like literal hell, like burning, and then he's also decaying.
Yeah, he starts
while
dying.
alive. That's nuts.
Yeah, it's horrifying, isn't it?
Like he's trying to write these hieroglyphics down for some reason, and they're somehow time looped backwards into being alive, but then they instantly die because they're not in the water. Mm-hmm. That's crazy. Mm-hmm. Okay. I will be reading us part 2. So this is the same character, but he, his balls got shucked up. It's a little bit higher voice now.
Something happened to his balls, is what you're saying.
In the ocean, it's very cold, and they shrivel up a bit. I promise that it's just cold out. It's not small. All right.
All right, let's do it.
Confessions of a Deep Sea Diver, part 2.
I'm going to answer some common questions I've received. Yes, I've experienced a lot of terrifying things in the ocean. But when you consider the amount of dives I've made, these experiences have truly been few and far between. Basic information about our dive gear. Well, it does get while it does vary based on the job, we do have a standard we typically use. We're hard hat divers, meaning we wear helmets, not scuba. It's surface supplied air. We have an air system on surface which runs through an umbilical down to the divers. The umbilical attaches to the helmet to supply the air. Woven in with the umbilical are our essentials. Without getting too technical, there's a line to supply air, electricity for a light, communications, and essentially a depth gauge. Additionally, we wear a tank on our back as an emergency gas supply. Doesn't contain much though, just enough to get to the surface in an emergency. We don't use rebreathers for the work we do. We do, however, occasionally use the full face mask instead of a helmet, or scuba if it's more practical, but it rarely is. The Keepers of the Deep. I've never found information about them online. The only people I've heard discuss them were the members of my team, and I've been told other teams have had run-ins with them too. Even the guys on my team are hesitant to speak about them. I'll answer more questions as they arise, but I'll get back to why you're really here. While working on an oil rig, we were utilizing an ROV, imagine a small remote control submarine, to do inspections. We'd been hired to inspect for structural damage or deficiencies after the rig complained about abnormal vibrations. During operations, the ROVs are tended from a line that offers power, a strength member, and transfers video and sonar images back to topside. As the ROV descended into the darkness below, we began to notice thin scratches along the structure. First, it was barely enough to rip the marine growth off the metal, but as we got deeper, the scratches turned into gouges. As we descended even deeper, we began to notice that the scratches appeared deliberate. We pulled the ROV up close to inspect. There, before us, were images. There were hieroglyphics carved into the metal.
Ooh, hieroglyphics make a comeback.
And they were fresh. The deeper we got, the older the carvings appeared. They were corroded and partially covered in growth. Whatever was making these carvings was working its way up from the bottom. Then, the ROV stopped responding. It began shaking back and forth. We lost power to it. We tried to pull it up by its tending line, but it seemed stuck. And then, we felt it tugging against the line. But it was coming from the ROV's side. Something was pulling it deeper. Two more guys jumped onto the line and struggled to pull it back up. The line began creaking and parted. We pulled up the remainder of the line, but that ROV was gone forever. The supervisor was then left with the task of figuring out how to report our findings to the oil company. One incident took place a year ago. During a salvage job, we were in the process of installing the rigging gear. While facing the ship, with my back to the open ocean, I hadn't noticed anything approaching. Suddenly, something smashed into the tank on my back. Hard. I was slammed into the ship, flattened against it by the force. I turned around. There was nothing. I would later learn that I had several bruised ribs from the impact. After reporting to the other diver and topside, we were told they were going to pull us. We got back to the stage and started being lifted toward the surface, and we kept our eyes peeled, scanning the not-too-distant shadows. During a decompression stop, we began seeing a shadowy figure circling us. During a decompression stop, we began seeing a shadowy figure circling around us. We continued to monitor it as it circled closer and closer. We began to see it more clearly. There was a massive shark circling us. Now, I've never been afraid of sharks, but there's something about being circled by a massive shark in the middle of the ocean, dangling from a chain, that can instill a new phobia in the bravest men. Keep in mind, we aren't in an enclosed cage, just a platform to stand on. Felt like being served on a platter. It eventually circled close enough to see its features, but I didn't recognize the species. It was bigger than a great white, with an entirely different coloration. It was mostly black, with a few gray features. It continued eyeing us as we sat there helpless, praying to be left alone. By the time we completed our decompression requirements, it was nearly close enough to touch. The stage lifted us up and out of the water, and relieved that the shark had not decided to find out how we taste. On the surface, we deduced that the shark had lunged at my back, but had only managed to hit the emergency gas supply cylinder.
Okay. One, I hate oil rigs. Two, that's the Black Demon.
That's like a known thing?
There, a massive black shark is believed to be like a cryptid shark, per se.
I'm gonna look into that. I'm gonna do an episode on that.
It's kind of like the megalodon, but the megalodon was like an actual species that
Right.
existed like back in the dinosaur eras.
Right.
But this is like a current species of shark that is like, it's not a great white, but it's like black with like a white underbelly, like very dark black, and it's huge. And I believe it's like they've done like those fake Discovery documentaries about it.
Sure.
And there's been sightings of ones, but it's like a urban legend thing.
Let's put a pin in that because I might do that as a cryptid episode.
Yeah, I don't know all the ins and outs, but I've heard like the black demon or the black something in some language or something.
Okay. We did another dive, this time in crystal clear waters. And there's something nice about getting a job in waters where you can actually see your surroundings. Visibility was over 100 feet. Got to the bottom and began work. There were 2 missiles that had been ejected from a military aircraft and had not detonated. We were briefed on their location and told they were not armed and would not detonate provided they were handled appropriately. We located them much easier than we expected and began preparing to read them up. Just as I laid my hands on the first missile, my dive buddy said,
"Oh shit."
I don't care how many times you've worked with ordnance. I sincerely believe you will always have that uncomfortable sensation in your gut and nervousness in the back of your mind. I looked up and realized he wasn't talking about the missile. He saw a wall of sand rising in the distance.
Like a sand wave?
A sand wave. Something, hopefully just the current, was kicking up the sand from the bottom of the ocean. The wall of sand was growing. It was about 30 feet tall. Even worse, it was approaching us. Soon, it was upon us. It's hard to describe what bad visibility does to the water. It's not a matter of not having enough light, it's a matter of too much crap in the water blocking the light. Imagine fog. But imagine, if you can, that this fog is thicker than anything you've ever witnessed. I'm talking about fog so thick that you can have a flashlight pointed at your eyes from an inch away, but you're completely blind to it.
Oh my god.
That's what bad visibility is in the water. The moment the sand hit us, we were engulfed in pure darkness. I placed my hand against my faceplate but couldn't even see it. After a few moments, we began hearing a metallic scraping sound. And then, as swiftly as it arrived, the sand was gone. We had crystal clear waters again. Except, there was no sign of the missiles. I had been within arm's reach when the wall of sand hit us, but now, even feeling around under the sand revealed no trace of them. The next incident occurred during a humanitarian job that we volunteered to perform. After a portion of bridge collapsed over 50-foot deep ocean waters, we volunteered to recover the vehicles, and hopefully, the bodies. By the time we arrived on scene, the collapse had taken place just over a week ago. We spent the first day surveying the area and developing a plan to lift most of what we could in the week time frame that we had available. By the start of day 2, we were actively pulling vehicles off the bottom. It was a difficult job, to say the least, but not because of the effort. The state of disarray in the cars was heartbreaking. These weren't military pilots or sailors lost at sea. These were families on vacation or people commuting to work. It was hard to say what was harder. Cars where we found an entire family with parents' seatbelts unbuckled and them in the back seat having been trying to unbuckle their children, or the cars where the parents got out, leaving the children buckled in the back seat.
Well, I'm sorry. That is evil.
I cannot imagine that.
That.
Tried not to imagine the panic that had been going on inside the cars as they flooded from the broken windshields or windows as people frantically tried to escape, but I couldn't forgive those that left their family to drown.
Same.
Each day we moved on to a new section of cars, and on the 4th day, we started noticing several of the cars had their doors open and nobody inside. We were happy to find easier work, especially under the assumption that the tragedy had been lessened by people escaping the wrecks. That is, until I began rigging a minivan for removal. The family inside hadn't been so lucky. As I ran slings through the van, prepared it to be lifted, I noticed the other diver inspecting the rigging gear. He began undoing one of the shackles. I asked what he was doing. The response was not what I had hoped for.
"I'm checking this truck for bodies."
I felt the familiar sick in my gut sensation. Slowly, I crept over to the diver, turned his body toward me. It resisted, but slowly turned its face toward me. Its faceplate was fogged up, and I fought my better judgment. I leaned in close, and I wish to this day I hadn't. It was dark, but I could all too clearly make out the features. Rotting flesh. The person wearing this helmet had long since passed away. I lost my confidence. Starting to scream, my comms were blazing. Divers and topside were frantically trying to get my attention, but I was focused on one thing only. I was scrambling backward, away from him. But I'd fouled my umbilical in the rigging gear in the state of my panic. The thing had again returned to focus on the minivan, and as I frantically cleared myself from the slings, I noticed the telltale lack of bubbles coming from the helmet. It was opening the minivan door and reaching inside. As I swam away from the van, I watched it grab one of the passengers and drag them into the darkness. This was when I began to realize I might not be cut out for working beneath the seas. I continued diving for longer than I knew I should, this entire time the thought lingering in the back of my mind that I need to get a safer career.
Okay, so that makes me think that the divers become the keepers of the deep. If whoever dies in the water
as a diver, that's what I'm thinking.
When you're
too.
a diver that dies, you become a keeper of the deep. If you're a person, then you are taken by the keepers of the deep that die when you die in the water.
And that's what the pile of bones was.
Yes.
I hate the fact that they were like, oh, these car doors are open. People must have got out. No. The keepers of the deep opened those doors and took people out.
Yeah, they stole them. Holy
That's
shit.
crazy.
And so the guy who's working with died and became one, or he was posing as one?
Yeah, he was posing as one. The guy he was talking to was not somebody who was on his team.
So a guy just showed up to help him, and he was like, oh, this is a keeper.
He realized it afterwards, yeah.
And I guess they didn't bother him because he was a diver and he was alive. It's like, well, I'm not here for you.
I kind of want to just, this is for, we can do this in post, but I kind of want you to say that line again, but like in like a kind of distorted kind of way, like, because you realize that you're dead.
I'm checking this truck for bodies.
Well, not quite like that, but just like in a, how a dead person would say it.
I'm checking this truck for bodies. Or like
Good.
more
Yeah.
zombie-esque. So you have to click on his account to get to the third part. Yeah, if you click on it, it should say third part final. Well, it took him 2 years for this final part after the last one.
So I'm interviewing the diving supervisor. That's you.
Okay.
Cool.
All right, so
All right.
here's the final part.
Part 3.
Confessions of a Deep Sea Diver.
I apologize it's taken so long for me to update you all. I've been resting on this story for the past week and honestly scared to share it. I believe this will be my final update. After my last post, I was contacted by my former diving supervisor, and he told me the danger of sharing these stories. Then, his tone changed.
Things are getting worse down there.
He had never before spoken freely about it with me, but he continued.
We had an incident this last week, and we lost men.
I was shocked. We all knew the dangers. We've all seen the keepers of the deep, but nobody actually expects to die. After a close call or two, you just expect to keep having close calls. He continued.
Out of respect for our fallen, you need to use your best judgment before sharing this, and realize it isn't safe to share this story.
He then continued.
The team was contacted to perform a standard salvage job for the military. They had been incredibly vague about the work, but indicated that a vessel had gone down. The dive team and their gear were loaded aboard a U.S. naval ship to be escorted to the project. This is abnormal, but not unheard of. But things became more and more strange as they traveled to the project. First, they were briefed on the commanding officer, or by the commanding officer. He reviewed the confidentiality agreement regarding our work. Then the brief was turned over to a man who did not introduce himself. He explained that the Navy had been working with us on a prototype submarine. Its capabilities and new technologies would not be relevant to us. All we needed to know that it was tremendous. The size would dwarf any subs we'd ever witnessed. He then admitted the Navy did not need routine salvage work, but assistance recovering their prototype. He briefed the team that 4 days prior they had lost contact with the crew. Sonar images showed the submarine resting on the bottom, apparently intact, but nobody was responding to communication attempts. As the ship arrived on the scene, they found that they were not alone. Nearly a dozen Navy ships had already been waiting for their arrival. The divers were given the go-ahead and they got in the water and began work. Their first task was to inspect the submarine for damage and hazards. They needed to provide a bottom report for the engineers to develop a plan for raising it. They didn't want us rigging it up, however, it seemed fit to us. They needed the prototype in as good a condition as possible. The divers entered the water and were soon in awe of the creation. It was like nothing they'd ever seen. It was tremendous. From when they descended, they could see the forward or aft end of the submarine, and the water was abnormally clear. They were brought back to the surface to swap out without event. They reported to the next set of divers that they had explored from midship to aft and they had found no apparent damage. The sub appeared to have been gently set down in the sand. The next set of divers entered to inspect the midship to the forward end. They began advancing while inspecting for damage. About 10 minutes into the dive, one diver began tapping on the hull. Immediately, both divers reported that they could hear people inside the submarine banging against the hull and shouting. They couldn't understand what they were screaming, but the message was clear. They were terrified. The supervisor reported that they found evidence that the crew was still alive. The divers continued advancing. It was about 5 more minutes before their next report. There were carvings across the metallic scaled surface. Hieroglyphics had been carved into the submarine and appeared to stretch from the very front of the submarine towards the midship. There was no signs of structural damage that would have caused the submarine to cease functioning. The divers returned to the surface, and the commanding officer was given a full report on the day's findings. The team was assured that the submarine was capable of sustaining the crew. They were eager to retrieve it, but the crew was believed to be in relatively little danger. Okay, really quick, I want to point this out. I think that they're using this submarine with this whatever power that this keeper of the deep power. This submarine involves them in some way. Like,
I think so.
They're using them as like a power source, I feel.
I think so. I think that's why they took it.
I think like they're very eager and they're using them because they have experience with the keepers. And they're trying to like summon them or like study them or something. As day 2 began, divers descended with instructions to locate 4 specific locations. Engineers needed to verify that there were still structurally sound for attaching riggings. Immediately, the divers reported that they could still hear the banging coming from within. They began locating the rigging points and quickly and easily. They approached the forward end of the ship, just within the region which was covered in carvings. They noticed a figure moving about. They both saw it. There was no denying it. But it soon disappeared from sight. The divers were unable to figure out where it had gone. They agreed to quickly find the remaining 2 points. It was quick work. The 2 remaining points were located, all 4 were intact and ready for available use. As they were ready to return to the surface, they were informed that there were 2 more locations that were asked to be inspected. There's supposedly 2 hatches, port and starboard, that the engineers had insisted needed to be checked. The supervisor was wary.
Engineers up here got uneasy when they heard your reports of something moving around the ship. They stepped inside and when they returned, insisted that you find the 2 hatches. Now, I'm not sure what's going on, but they're being very ambiguous and just please be cautious.
The divers returned to the area in question and began closely re-examining the area. As they worked, they soon saw a figure emerging from the submarine. It was dragging a body out of the hatch. They froze and watched it as it pushed the hatch closed and began to drag it into the distance. Then they approached the spot and realized the hatch was almost indistinguishable between the scales and carvings of the submarine. But it was there. As they were reporting this, the hatch began to open again. Topside lost communication with the 2 divers. It was sheer panic on topside. The tenders were reporting strain on the divers' umbilicals. The standby diver donned his helmet and prepared to get in the water. The umbilicals began violently shaking and pulling. The standby diver was clearly terrified, but nonetheless approached the side of the ship and prepared to enter the water. The strain on the umbilicals released, and suddenly the lines went limp in the water. A few moments later, air bubbles were erupting to the surface. The supervisor grabbed the standby diver and told him to get the divers and get the fuck out of there. He entered the water and began tracing their umbilicals. His goal was to follow the umbilicals to the divers in distress. As he followed the umbilicals, he saw their air violently erupting from below and continue deeper. He reached the source. The umbilicals had been cut free of the divers and were pumping air into the water. Knowing the divers had no air supply, he urgently searched the area for the 2 divers. After 5 minutes, found no sign and was ordered to inspect the hatch. He frantically made his way to the hatch, hoping, beyond hope, to find the divers alive. As he approached, he found the hatch open and saw 2 bodies laying on the floor. He entered the space to retrieve them. As he did, he noticed several figures in the darkness of the room. He grabbed the nearest body and began pulling as the figures rushed towards him.
Oh.
They were instantly upon him, tearing at him and his gear. In fear, he released the body and attempted to flee the space. In the struggle, he freed himself and rocketed to the surface. He was pulled up and over the side of the ship, unconscious. His bloody body laid on the deck, likely suffering from an arterial gas embolism from his rapid ascent. The team rushed him into the hyperbaric chamber to treat him. The supervisor informed the commanding officer that all diving was to be terminated. He had lost 2 men, and 1 was in critical condition. There were inexplicable things that happened on the submarine, and he would not sacrifice more men. The treatment continued through the night. The diver regained consciousness. He told the supervisor he was done. He would not re-enter the water again. Ever. He was assured nobody would be returning, and that as soon as his treatment was complete, the entire team was returning to land. The next morning, the team was summoned for what believed to be a debrief. They entered a room to speak with the commanding officer and his team of engineers. The CEO asked them to take a seat. He then informed them that they would not move forward with the salvage of the prototype. However, what was down there couldn't remain. Whatever was inside that submarine had to be positively destroyed. The team was to re-enter the water, plant charges in locations specified by the engineering team. The supervisor was furious. He demanded the team be taken back to mainland and released from the ship. Armed sentries entered the room and restrained him. The CEO again repeated his order and clarification that the team would not be allowed to leave until the job was complete. Diveside was reassembled under the watch of several armed sailors. The supervisor continued to protest this job. After an hour of conflict, 2 divers agreed, under duress, to get in the water and plant the charges. 2 divers entered the water. Fearfully, they moved into specific locations and began placing the charges. They began hearing banging and shouting coming from within the sub. The divers, understanding these men would be killed, began sobbing. The CEO came onto the comms and again explained that they would not be allowed to leave until the job was complete. After regaining their composure, the 2 regretfully continued. The 2 completed their task and returned to the surface. In their shame, they refused to speak to anyone and left diveside. The ships began departing from the location and the team was again summoned. The commanding officer thanked the men for their service, for their great nation, and informed them that they would be handsomely rewarded for the regrettable tragedy they had encountered. He then went over to the confidentiality of the job and that everything that they had witnessed. His final words to them were,
Previous events have been leaked to the public. Please realize there will be real consequences for any leaked information about what happened here today. My supervisor ended the conversation, stating that the entire team had agreed that they were going to leave the diving company. Their fear of the deep sea and remorse for the job were too great. He told me,
"There are some places man simply isn't meant to explore." And that's the end of Confessions of a Deep Sea Diver. Honestly, I like the vague ending.
I like it too. It doesn't have to button it all up. It doesn't have to be bigger than it is. It's just, we don't go back there. And that's a rational line of thought.
But there's enough common elements to like piece together what it's not like random stories. It's like there's hieroglyphics everywhere. There's these keepers of the deep that are like dead divers.
Right. It's spooky, man. It's spooky.
So it's interesting because this submarine also had these hieroglyphics on it. That makes me think the hieroglyphics are like a time thing that or keep them alive somehow.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how the hieroglyphics play into this. I don't know. It's like a code, or it's like a Yeah, I don't know.
Because it makes me think Eldritch horror like Cthulhu, because Cthulhu is basically like you find the island and you put in the right hieroglyphic code and you can summon him or whatever. That's how like the lore is or whatever. But it's peculiar that there's like the keepers, which seem to be dead divers, specifically divers.
Right.
But then I'm thinking, well, wouldn't the people in the submarine be sailors or are they divers?
I think the divers kind of like co-opted the submarine. I think they took it and like made it their place to, you
Like
know, their base of operations.
Like their like dead corpsey like area, like they stole it.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, I think they like, I don't know, man. It's vague, but it's good that way. It doesn't
Yeah.
we don't need to have all the answers.
What do you think happened?
Comment below.
But
subscribe for more.
I think
our storyline died.
I figured it would happen. So that means it's the end of story time.
It's the end of story time. Hope you enjoyed it.
So I think that one holds up.
Oh, I agree. That
'Cause-
that one still is just as riveting as it was day one. And I love kind of like the reason I gave you for loving the back rooms, right?
Yeah.
That it doesn't need to be an in-your-face, imminent threat for it to be scary.
Exactly.
I kind of like that it's like, hey, weird things happen here. And it's like, it's that feeling of just like being disoriented, that feeling of like, you know, being lost. Like that's scarier to me than like, oh, there's a monster in front of me coming at me, you know?
Because like a monster coming at me is like scary because like, oh, monster, I'm dead. It's
Right.
Like, lost. It's like I could be here for days.
It's a
and
whole
years.
other type
How
of
does
scary.
time work here? Am I gonna live forever and like slowly die? Like
Right.
maybe if I walk this way, like
And what it also does really well is it uses the zombie motif in a different way.
yes,
Because the zombie motif is scary because it's, no, you are also the monster, right? That's the point. Or you could be the monster. And if they get you, you're one of them. So I like how he used that, but it wasn't over the top. It was like, it left a lot of room for a whole bunch of extra lore that like you never need to know and you still understand it, you
Right.
know?
I like that there's an overarching story to it that you can piece together. And if there's a story that's blatantly going to be like, this is the monster, like, then I like it when it's like, hey, right up top, here's the monster, and we're gonna be dealing it with the whole time.
Right.
Like that, it's like, okay, but if it's meant to be like this feeling of eeriness, then the vagueness is better. But
Yeah. I will say this, and we haven't gone back and read it again, but no pun intended. That was stupid. But I think the reason both of those I read both of them at the same time, Search and Rescue Officer and this one, I do think Search and Rescue Officer captures that feeling that I'm talking about a little better. That feeling of being disoriented and lost and not being like, not understanding what forces you're dealing with here. I think that captures it a little better than this, but this still holds up really well as like as a short and sweet, like this is what No Sleep is about. I'd rate that an 8 out of 10. I think that is more. No Sleep should be like that. More creepypasta should be like that.
I mean, this was one of the early ones, so
Yeah, it's true.
if anything, it only gets better from here. Or
True.
And if we go back earlier, I'm telling you, I got ones that are so popular, but you read it and you're like, what?
You're talking about the Abandoned by Disney one?
That one, and oh my, and
it was bad even at the time.
it's so bad.
You know?
Want to see my head come off?
Yeah, that part I was completely
It was a negative Mickey Mouse.
Dude, I completely left the story at that part. Like, want to see my head come off? Ah! And I'm like, what is this? Who wrote this?
A trend we'll notice is a lot of these stories have very strong openings, and by the end, if they go on long enough, they just fall flat.
I hate to say it. That's what mold does, though.
I know,
But it's still worth reading.
it's
We're
worth
still
reading
going to do it.
because that first part of the
Oh my
story
gosh.
is so good.
So compelling.
So we'll read that too. And there's another story we're also going to cover that is a Twitter ARG. And
Oh,
it's
interesting.
called The Gregory Story.
Oh, that's me. That's my story.
Yeah, it's literally just called Gregory, like 123, because that's his account name. So
Okay. Good.
it's a good one.
I would love to play Gregory in that story.
Yeah, it's literally a guy tweeting. Like,
Oh, nice.
It's so good. We'll cover that one too.
Yeah.
Because I was following along that one while it was happening, like
Nice.
while he's tweeting.
Well,
I'm
that's
like,
what we did with these no sleeps. Like it was while they were being posted. I was in it, and then I told you about it when all the parts were done, and I was like, you should check these out.
Well,
yeah.
Let us know any other stories. I will definitely be showing this man Baraska, and he will probably pass away from fear.
Great.
And so will
Love that. We will see you guys next time.